Imagine this, your family ranch. Decades of work, improvements, fences, watering holes, and suddenly one day, overnight, you're told that you've committed a crime and that they're taking everything from you. That's what happened to the Kings. But more than that, I think that what we're seeing is something bigger than just the Kings. A state agency in and of itself acting like a crime family. This is the war on ranching that many of you aren't told about. And it's starring an American family in eastern Washington. But guys, this is not just about the Kings. This is your land. This is your fight. Now, I've been around ranching country long enough to know that when you change the rules mid-game, you don't just penalize people. You destroy entire legacies. And that's what the corrupt Washington Department of Ecology is doing to the King family. And the Washington Department of Natural Resources as well. Here's the headline that they put out there in February of 2023. The DOE, Department of Ecology, a government crime family, filed a fine against the Kings of $267,000. A little more than that, actually. $267,540 if you want to be precise about it. The Department of Ecology was alleging that the Kings had destroyed over 22, maybe even 23 alkali wetlands. Now, this occurred, according to the Department of Ecology, over private, state, and federal lands. It happened across the board. The Kings were evil, evil people. Some people say, well, how did they know this? Well, the Department of Ecology used Google satellite images to determine this massive destruction of alkali wetlands. Believe it or not, the government uses private corporations and their software to spy on you every single day. Google satellite images is just one of those things. Basically, what the Department of Ecology was saying here was that the Kings had dredged pools of water, they had expanded them, and they had destroyed alkali wetlands, all in doing so without obtaining the proper permits from the Department of Ecology. This is one of the largest Department of Ecologies in the United States. It has to have a lot of funding. They need that $267,540 from the Kings to keep going. But the Kings fired back and said, wait, hold on here. These are long-established stock ponds. The Kings have been on this property for decades, and the stock ponds were there and maintained by ranchers before them. I mean, super long. These stock ponds are so old that I could see how they could be confusing to an intern in the Department of Ecology's office. So right out of the gate here, what we're talking about is the difference between wetlands and stock ponds, and whether or not a bureaucratic agency can tell the difference after 70, 80 years. They should. Because in the West, the differences between these two are academic. They're basically, as we've seen in this case, the difference between ranching permitted and ranch banned. Now, I think it's important to remember here that the Kings have been grazing this land and maintaining these stock ponds for decades without any issues with the DNR. A perfect record with the DNR, which is Department of Natural Resources. Then, out of the blue, suddenly one day, the DNR comes in and says, hey, you guys are acting criminally. And in fact, we're going to ask for a criminal investigation against you and your family. That should raise a red flag to every single one of you.
Every day, more and more Americans are waking up to the fact that our society is simply unhealthy. We've been being fed poisons and being told to put poisons on our body by corporate America for years. A lot of the things that we've been told were bad for us, like animal fats, are actually good for our bodies. Your skin is the largest organ of your body, which is why on Yanasa Trading Co., we're pleased to offer you guys bison tallow lotions and creams. These bison tallow lotions and creams are amazing. They're not made by a big corporation. They're made by a homesteader, just like you guys, our friends out of Canada, Dr. Nathaniel and Susan Ostashowski. We've visited numerous bison ranches and farms and parks across the entire continent of North America. And these are some really great people who have come up with some really great products. And you can buy them on Yanasa Trading Co. and support this program and support your health all at the same time.
Let's get a little bit into the details of what happened here, just for some background before I continue going into this case. But basically what happened was back in February of 2021, a hiker from the Confederate Tribes of Colville Reservation was basically out hiking. He saw some equipment parked next to a stock pond. He contacted the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife and said, hey, I'm not sure, this isn't supposed to be here. Look into it. So in November of 2021, Department of Fish and Wildlife decides, we're going to pass this tip on to the Department of Natural Resources, probably because they didn't really have an angle that they could come at it from. About a month later, DNR refers the case to the Department of Ecology, the Department of Ecology for the state of Washington. And at that time, the Department of Ecology issues the first type of formal notice. Then, in February of 2023, the Department of Ecology issues a penalty notice, $267,500 fine. And just to make sure that it's really difficult for the Kings to know what exactly is going on, what the evidence is, how to respond to it, they refer them for criminal investigation. By referring the ranchers to criminal investigation, it allows the Department of Ecology and the Department of Natural Resources to keep a lot of their quote-unquote evidence hush-hush. We can't give that to you because this is an open criminal investigation. We've all heard that before with the Mod family, for example. It's the perfect way of keeping information from somebody to defend themselves, because they can't defend themselves and they get this huge fine put against them for apparently destroying alkali wetlands that they have no idea of anything about. They've only maintained stock ponds on the property, on the leased property. Their leases were pulled out from underneath their ranch. That means that they can no longer raise the cattle that they were raising before because they don't have the land to put it on. You can see how this is a pretty big problem for the King Ranch. So in 2024, the King Ranch turned around and they sued the Department of Ecology and Department of Natural Resources for not following their own protocols. That suit is still ongoing. And at this point in time, the reason why this is coming back up is because Secretary Rollins from the Trump administration has reached out to the family and said, hey, we've got your back on this. We're going to do what we can. But it's one of those things, and she's done a pretty good job of navigating this climate so far, but it's one of those things where it is a state issue. This is the State Department of Ecology and the State Department of Natural Resources. They're acting like a crime family. If you guys aren't familiar, the State Department of Ecology also made 30,000 people at the beginning of this year prove that they had water rights. They fined an 85-year-old man over $100,000, $120,000 for watering his hay. This Department of Ecology has one objective, and that is to shut down farmers and ranchers in the state of Washington. They've made that very clear. Anyway, so this wasn't some sudden inspection. It spiraled. The agencies were referring it to each other, probably because the Department of Ecology was the only crime family that could figure out a way to prosecute the people. And then, boom. Thousands of acres of leases gone, tens of thousands of dollars invested into infrastructure from this family gone. They actually told the family, the ranching family, that everything they put into the property was of theirs. Their personal property was therefore forfeited. They lost everything that was there. It smells like this was something that was engineered from the top down. That's how the Department of Ecology works. So just remember, these are ponds that they have maintained for over 68 years under the supervision of the Department of Natural Resources. Under RCW 904450, these types of stock ponds are actually exempt from having to have a permit. Yet to the Department of Ecology, the Kings have committed a criminal act. This whole thing is not enforcement. It's flat out intimidation. If you think this is just about the Kings, you are absolutely wrong. This is about every rancher with ponds, with water rights, with land leases. This is about every American citizen who enjoys eating beef, a highly nutritious food. It's important for your health. And this system is falling apart in states where policies just kind of shift like sand. 68 years ago, 100 years ago, ponds were dug. They're fine. They're stock ponds. Suddenly, state agency decides those are natural wetlands. But even with the Kings suing in this case, getting the national spotlight, the damage is done. Ranches don't just rebuild overnight. The leases, the water systems, the infrastructure invested into making these properties work for these ranching operations span generations for a reason. The capital improvements. You knock one down, you knock the Kings down, you knock down an entire way of life. Bottom line, I think the King family needs our support, not our silence. They're battling the state, the same state that took 30,000 of its residents to court over their water rights last spring. The same state that wants to take land away from an 85-year-old farmer for watering his hay. The Kings are fighting for you because the Department of Ecology, if they win this, the same president stands for your pond, your neighbor's pond, your cousin's lease, your friend's cattle business, your local beef source, what you pay at the grocery store. Share this story. Let rural voices be heard. Demand transparency, public records, open rulemaking, agency accountability. Who holds these people accountable for acting like a crime family themselves? In my opinion, the Department of Ecology is a crime family. Stealing land from American farmers and ranchers, stealing water rights from its own citizens. Support the Kings, write legislators, and follow their story, because the freedom to ranch is a legacy worth saving. At the very heart of this is Americans' food sovereignty. And, if we do not protect our ranchers, we're going to lose that. If we don't protect our farmers, we're going to lose that. We're going to lose it to Argentina, to Brazil. We've already lost a significant portion of the industry over the years. And it's the industry that feeds us. It's not something we could just let go. When agencies rewrite the rules, redefine the map, redefine laws, and pull the rug out of decades of work, generations of work, that's not regulation, that's expropriation. The King Ranch is fighting. Let's make sure they're not fighting alone.
Ancient eras and natural selection have refined and tailored pristine fibers with the resilience for today's days. Evolving beyond the last ice age, bison wool is nature's most dependable activewear. Buffalo Wool Company, 100% proven by nature, 100% American made.
Check out the Buffalo Wool Company collection at yanasatradingco.com.